We often look at colonial history and we see these, huge treaties signed in grand rooms in London or Paris.
Hmm.
But to really get how a nation's identity is built, you have to zoom right in. You have to find those moments where one leader just refuses to be a line on someone else's map.
That refusal, especially somewhere like Yemen right after World War I, well, it took this incredible mix of religious authority, smart diplomacy, and just pure defiance, even when you're facing impossible odds.
So today we're doing a deep dive into that exact story. We're looking at the years 1918 to 1927 and one man, Imam Yahya Hamid al-Din of Yemen.
Right.
Our mission is to figure out how he challenged first the crumbling Ottoman Empire and then the much bigger threat, the British Empire, which saw Southern Arabia as absolutely vital to its global power.
And that 9-year window is just so foundational. It's where this ancient moral claim to sovereignty just smashes head-on into 20th century politics and, modern military tech.
It really shaped the map of Yemen for decades to come.
And it laid the groundwork for the country's future division.
So here's the big question for you, our listener. How does a leader with, let's be honest, very limited resources manage to hold on to the core of his nation, and just as important, the idea of a sovereign Yemen against the world's #1 superpower? And what scars did that fight leave behind?
Okay, let's get into it.
To understand Yahya's position in 1918, we have to go back a little bit.
Yeah, you really do. He wasn't a new player. He'd been the Zaidi Imam since 1904. And the Zaidi Imam, you have to understand, is this centuries-old institution in the Northern Highlands that combines religious and political power in one person.
So he had this immense built-in authority, especially with the Highland tribes.
Immense. And he wasn't starting from zero in terms of actually governing. He had already dealt with the Ottomans.
Ah, yes, the 1911 Treaty of Defied.
Exactly. Before the British had to deal with him, the Ottomans did. That treaty gave him effective autonomy over his Zaidi heartland. So when the Ottomans finally collapsed in World War I, Yahya was already there, the established local power in the north.
But the sources are clear that Yemen at this point is not a unified country. It's more like a mosaic.
A total patchwork. You had all these different tribal areas, competing religious groups, the Zaidis in the north, sure, but the Shafisi Sunnis were dominant in the south and on the coast. It was not a modern state.
And this fragmented region is sitting right next to maybe the most important strategic point on the planet for the British.
Aden. It was everything. The naval base, the coaling station.
Yeah.
It protected the sea route to India.
So the British didn't want to conquer the whole interior. They just needed a buffer zone.
That's it. Their model was to sign these protectorate treaties with local sheikhs and sultans, pay them subsidies, give them protection, and create a ring of friendly states around Aden.
Which sets up this complete clash of visions. The British see their protectorates as, necessary colonial infrastructure.
While Yahya sees it as a religious and national betrayal, his claim was, it was total. He believed all of historical Yemen, including those southern areas where the British were signing treaties, belonged to him as imam.
He just flat out rejected that some foreign power could come in and carve up his country with bits of paper.
And any southern leader who took British money, in his eyes, they were betraying the nation. A conflict was, it was inevitable.
Okay, so the timeline really starts to pick up speed here. The second the Ottomans are gone, Yahya makes his move.
Instantly. The key date is October 30th, 1918. He declares independence, marches right into Sana'a, and secures the capital. Then he works fast to bring the big northern Highlander tribes, the Hashid, the Colon, under his banner.
The Northern Corps.
The essential Northern Corps, yeah.
But the South is still this web of British treaties, so you get this immediate split, a de facto division of the country.
North under Yahya, South under British influence, and that blurry line between them, that becomes the flashpoint.
Because Yahya starts actively challenging those treaties.
He does. He puts immense pressure on the sheiks who take British money. And for them, it's an impossible choice. They're being attacked by the spiritual leader of the North, but they need British subsidies to survive.
And that pressure eventually explodes into actual fighting.
By 1922, yes. Yahya's forces start launching strikes into some of these protectorate zones.
But the British response from Aden is not what they were expecting.
It was immediate, and it was completely disproportionate. And it introduced a new kind of warfare to the region.
You're talking about air power.
The Royal Air Force.
Yep.
The RAF. They didn't send in ground troops at first. They just sent bombers. For Yahya's tribal forces who fought from mountain forts, this was It was devastating. There was no defense against it.
It's the classic colonial playbook for the 1920s, isn't it?
It's the template.
Hmm.
It showed Yahya that he might win a skirmish on the ground, but he could never ever win a direct fight against Britain's technology.
So those early attacks don't work, but it doesn't make him back down. It just makes him smarter, more strategic.
Much smarter. This brings us to 1925 and a really bold move. He attacks the coast and he captures the port of Aludeta.
Okay, but he's not taking it from the British directly.
No, from a rival local dynasty called the Idrisids, who were, let's say, friendly with the British.
But wait, if he knows Britain has total air superiority, why risk it? Taking a major port seems like just asking for trouble.
It was a huge risk, but it was calculated. Fos taking Al Hudaydah showed he could project power beyond his highland base. It gave him a vital outlet to the world.
And second,
He used that moment of victory to make a political statement. He formally declared all the British protectorate treaties to be null and void.
so he wasn't just grabbing territory, he was attacking the entire legal basis for the British being there.
Exactly. And the British could not let that stand.
And that's when the British hammer, as you call it, really came down.
It did. They unleashed everything. They bombed his strongholds, but this time they also bombed cities like Taiz and Ib to break civilian morale. They poured more money and weapons into their allied sheiks.
Well, it's just such a mismatch. He has tribal warriors, and they have warplanes and naval guns.
Right. And that's the moment of realization for Yahya. He understands that military force alone is a dead end.
So if you can't win on the battlefield, you have to find another battlefield.
You have to find a diplomatic one. He knew the only way to counter Britain's military power was with international legitimacy. He needed a powerful friend.
Enter Italy, Britain's main rival in the Red Sea.
Precisely. The Italo-Yemeni Treaty of 1926 was a diplomatic masterstroke. Italy had colonies just across the water in Eritrea, and they loved any chance to undermine the British.
This is such a great example of how diplomacy can be a weapon. It wasn't about getting Italian tanks, it was about getting recognition.
It was about forcing Britain to treat him like a head of state, not a rebel. Italy officially recognized him as the King of Yemen. And this was the part that really infuriated the British. They also recognized his claim to all of Yemen, including Aden.
So it didn't physically remove the British, but it gave him a legal standing on the world stage.
A huge boost. And with that new legitimacy, the conflict peaks in 1927. His forces push so far south they get to within about 50 kilometers of Aden itself.
Which must have caused absolute panic in the British command.
It did. And the British response was the fiercest yet. The bombing became so intense, the cost in lives and loyalty became too much for Yahya. He had to pull his forces back.
He accepted that unification by force just wasn't going to happen. Not then.
Not then.
So let's just synthesize this for a moment. Why was total victory impossible for him?
Well, it really comes down to a few core things. One, obviously British technology, the air power. Two, he didn't have any real international support beyond Italy's recognition.
And internally, the state was still pretty fragile.
Very fragile. He had a weak bureaucracy, not much money, and some of the tribes could always be tempted by British subsidies. It was hard to keep everyone unified.
But if we only focus on what he didn't achieve, we miss the whole point. What did he actually succeed in doing?
So much. He preserved the northern core of Yemen as a sovereign, independent state. He stopped a total foreign takeover, and he kept the idea of a unified Yemen alive. That vision became his legacy.
And when you break it down, he was fighting on 3 different levels at once.
That's a great way to put it. First, you have religious legitimacy. As Imam, he could frame this as a holy struggle, which is a powerful, unifying force for the northern tribe.
Then you have the tribal alliances. He built his power on the loyalty of the Highlanders. That was his military base.
And third, as we saw, diplomacy. He brilliantly used the rivalry between Italy and Britain to give himself a legal weapon that he didn't have militarily.
But this whole struggle left lines on the map. The border he couldn't break through, that became permanent for a long time.
Absolutely. That line between Yahya's northern state and the southern British protectorates hardened over time and became the border between North and South Yemen, a division that lasted for most of the 20th century.
And it left human scars too, not just political ones.
Deep ones. It created this lasting distrust. Many southern tribes saw Yahya's forces not as liberators, but as invaders from the north. Those grievances, that sense of betrayal, you can trace echoes of that in Yemen's conflicts even today.
So Yahya's story, it's so much more than a historical footnote. It really shows that sovereignty isn't just about land. It's about dignity. It's about refusing to accept lines drawn by outsiders.
That's it. If you only read the colonial archives, you miss the moral dimension. You miss the human cost. He may have lost the battle for Aden at that moment, but by preserving the core identity, the political vision of one Yemen, he ensured the idea itself would survive.
The memory of defiance, that's the real legacy.
And here's a final thought for you to take away. If a military defeat, like Yahya's pullback in 1927, can actually end up strengthening a nation's identity and inspire generations to keep fighting for unity, then how much of the conflict we see in the world today is driven not really by current events, but by the lingering memory of lines drawn on a map decades ago by people who thought those lines would last forever?